Hello there, I'm the student and it is time again for another Greenland video. Yes, the new 1.1 patch dropped actually I think 2 weeks ago. And yeah, this is now the time to obviously see what changed with my, I would say by this point, signature campaign, Greenland. And this is why I'm going to show you how to succeed as Greenland in Europa Universalis 5, patch 1.1. So first of all, while you see the starting moves in the background, I wanted to talk about the most important things that changed in the recent patch that actually made the previous strategies that I uploaded on this channel as well obsolete, basically, completely, because yeah, these things were kind of important that were changed right now. So the first thing is obviously that you probably heard that by this point. It is way harder to actually start a decent standing army as a smaller nation now. And the reason for that is that you need way more soldiers for the regiments now. And that of course also means you need more money. Just to give you an example, in the crazy strategy that I had where I actually discovered the New World before 1380 even, in that game, I basically got a standing army of 150 cavalry regiments, okay? So the cavalry regiments were 50 men per regiment, and therefore I could have one regiment on each line of the battlefield, right? So one in the middle and one on each of the sides, without them being able to basically surround me on the battlefield, because I had one professional standing regiments on every line of the battlefield. Now, the cavalry regiments are 200 men per regiment. Now, as far as I can tell, they didn't really change the cost of manpower per man, and also not the cost of gold per man. But of course, as there are way more, like 4 times as many men per regiment, you now need way more money, actually 4 times as much money, for the same result, and also 4 times more soldiers. Because if I want one regiment on each line of the battle, middle, left and right, then I would need to have 600 men, and I need to fund 600 men right now instead of 150 men before. Which means that I not only have to wait for armories, because the sergeantry is not enough for that, but also I need to get 4 times as much money, of course. Now the second problem is sadly money, because in the strategy that I did before on 1.0, I was basically selling provinces that I conquered for a lot of money to other nations, right? So, for example, I would fight the Teutons and then sell their provinces that I took in that war to Lithuania or Poland for like around 1,000 or 2,000 ducats in total. Now, this doesn't work anymore, because there is now a money worth check, basically, that defines how much that specific location is actually worth. And the AI is willing to pay more if they have more money, but they are not ready to pay their entire treasury anymore as they used to do. So now you would actually need to get like 10 times more provinces to get the same money out of that conquest. And then on top of that, of course, these 2 points, 1 and 2, with the army and the money problem, they combine each other, because I can't fight stronger enemies because you need more money to get a better army, but I can't get easy money anymore because I need to fight stronger enemies for that. Okay, so there's this loop that basically doesn't make it possible to scale as I did in the 1.0 patch. And therefore I had to come up with a different solution. And the solution starts, as always, as you can probably see in the background already, with the usual independence war. That is actually quite easy as it was before. You can like just invite whoever you want, basically. I think I invited like England, Bohemia, and then also Sweden. So to break their alliances and so on. And yeah, the independence war was very, very easy. And then instead of taking provinces that give me more manpower or something, because I wouldn't have the money anyways, I decided to actually take the Kongsberg silver mine. The Kongsberg silver mine is basically the Norwegian silver mine next to Oslo. And what I did is I took that province with the silver mine and then a path to the sea so that I would later make the port my capital, because a capital on the coastline has several advantages, of course, and the silver mine is still close enough to basically fully control it. Now, having the silver mine gives you an insane and immediate boost of your income that is actually pushing you up to the point where you can compete with incomes like Norway or Sweden have. Now, you can't really fight them because you would still need to wait for armories and then build that up and so on. But you, with that silver mine, you will have enough money to fund everything that you want to fund on your own without relying on any conquest whatsoever. And the most important part is that you don't care about inflation at that point. Now, the inflation is going to rise anyways because so much, like basically 90% of your entire income is coming from silver. Okay, so your inflation is rising anyways. Now, what you want to do is you want to fully mint your coins, okay? Now, normally you wouldn't do that ever because it gives you a lot of inflation for not that much money. But as I am producing the silver myself, I can actually mint coins with a very, very high efficiency. So I'm actually getting like 150% more income from minting, just from putting the minting slider up. And I'm only getting double the inflation because the silver mine on its own is already giving me so much. So basically, minting at this point is earning me more money than it costs me in inflation. Of course, this has its limits because I'm not earning like 1,000 ducats per month. I'm just earning about 20 gold per month, which is already a lot, honestly. At this early stage of the game, starting as Greenland. Now, but that means that you can get around 200% inflation, and it would still be worth it to actually mint your coins. And that is exactly what I was doing. So I was minting a lot of coins. I was getting inflation, yes, but I was getting more income faster than the inflation could rise. And therefore, I would actually make a lot of money, honestly. And I used that money to found a town on the coastline where I moved my capital. And then basically, while I was waiting for institutions, remember you need the banking institution to actually get the range to go to Newfoundland later. But while I was waiting for that, I was basically building whatever building I could, whatever, you know, special building I could, like sergeantries or the royal court and so on. And I was basically spending my money on everything that I could. And you're going to see in a second that this is actually going to be worth it long term. Now, the last thing that I did before fixing my inflation problem, because let's be honest, at that point I was getting towards 300% inflation, which at that point it wasn't worth it anymore, basically. Before I fixed that inflation problem, I actually also started to explore Newfoundland. Now, at this point, I was actually 20 years later than the strategy where all the crazy stuff with the selling provinces, 150 man armies beating everyone and so on patch 1.0 worked. Only 20 years later right now, which is, in my opinion, still a pretty decent thing to discover America in 1400, okay? Still 100 years almost before it happened historically. Of course, I wanted to start the colony immediately, but the first province of the colony always takes ages, as you know, so I was just doing that in the background while fixing my inflation problem. And the way I fixed that was a chain bankruptcy. Now you see, bankruptcy is gives you a lot of bad modifiers, but of course it doesn't multiply those modifiers. So if you go bankrupt and then take one loan and go bankrupt again, you have the same modifier as before. You don't have like double the bad modifier, okay? So basically, in terms of the modifiers, it's totally irrelevant if you go bankrupt once or if you go bankrupt 20 times. Now, of course, there is also the stability hit, 50 stability loss per declared bankruptcy. But of course, if you go bankrupt more than 4 times, and that doesn't matter as well, because you are already at negative 100 stability, you can't lose any more than that. And then there is sadly one more thing that bankruptcy does, which is that it gets rid of about 10% of your buildings. Now, if you of course do that 20 times, the percentage modifier is going to be a lower absolute number, right? So if I have 100 buildings, the first bankruptcy will get rid of 10 buildings. And then the second bankruptcy will get rid of 9 buildings and so on, right? So mathematically, it actually takes you around 22 bankruptcies to then still have 10% of your buildings left that you had before starting the bankruptcy chain. And the interesting thing is that a bankruptcy does the same thing to your inflation. So every time you go bankrupt, you lose 10% of your inflation. So I had more than 300% inflation at that point, but the first bankruptcy already got rid of 30% inflation in one bankruptcy. Okay, and then the next one a little less, okay, still. But if you do that 22 times, which then at that point still leaves you with 10% of your buildings that you built only because you minted your inflation so high, I basically got rid of my entire inflation, like except like the last 10%, of course, while of course I made a lot of progress in the meantime, okay? Of course I lost 90% of the buildings that I built, but I already discovered the new world, for example, and the town doesn't get decreased and so on. So basically the minting and the silver mine were a kind of debt that I was that I would take without any interest, basically, that just bought me time that I could use to actually make progress. And now if you have a look on my current situation in 1427, so basically I just waited until the colony finished over here. As you can see, I have my first colony in the new world. Still, by the way, 60 years before it happened historically. You can see if you have a look on my economy, I still have 30% inflation. 30% inflation is kind of a lot, but you have to keep in mind, I'm still making a lot of money because of that silver mine. You can see my total tax base is 42, which the tax base of Norway, for example, is 47. And you can see Norway has 10 times the population that I have, but they have the same tax base. Okay, or if you compare that to Hungary, for example, who has almost 100 times the population than I have, like maybe, you know, 90 times the population that I have, but they have only 10 times more money than I have. And this is really the very interesting situation that I end up. You can see with right now, I also have the burghers, of course. I gave them a privilege. And with that, actually, and with building up my economy elsewhere, so you can see right now my capital city, I built up a few town buildings as well by this point. That you can see, by the way, the royal court, I kept them actually. I kept the royal court and the sergeantry through the bankruptcy, and also a few of those other buildings. And the estates are building buildings as well, which is completely free for me. Now, such as all of these buildings for the laborers, basically. So I actually have an economy right now that doesn't run only on the silver mine. And therefore you can see that the inflation is actually fully under control. I'm still making a very, very little amount of inflation per month. But if I'm building up my capital more, if I'm conquering maybe like Oslo, for example, from Norway later, then you're going to notice that this is going to go down, and 31% is not a lot at all, right? So if I just let this run for like 10 more years or something, I'm probably down at 20% already. And that is while I'm colonizing the new world 60 years earlier than everybody else. And I have the money, as you can see, to fund further explorations easily. So from now on, I'm actually scaling my country without any losses, without any downside, and with the ability to colonize a whole new world. And I think this is actually the perfect moment to end this video because, yeah, as you can see, I managed to succeed as Greenland, more than succeed, I would even say. I'm still way ahead of every other colonizer. I'm making very, very good money that can easily fund further explorations and colonizations. I have a very decent population. I can easily build up a standing army. You can see I've got more than enough manpower and sailors to easily manage that. And that's it. That's how to succeed as Greenland in Europa Universalis 5, patch 1.1. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments if you tried Greenland as well, or if you will try it after this video. That would be very nice to hear because I'm a big fan of this country, of course. And we are going to see, as always, on another Monday.